You are being recorded.
And God. Did you mean to do that?
No.
God. All right. Welcome to episode 79 of the Civil War Breakfast Club.
Take two.
Welcome to episode 79 of the Civil War Breakfast Club podcast. Tonight, I am joined by the guy who is insistent I do these intros, even though they are as bad as what happened to the Bruins against the Leafs the other night, and I usually have to do them in 2 or 3 takes. I'm his co-host and the Canadian half of this show, Mary.
Didn't like that one. Not at all. Not even a little bit.
I'm a Bruins fan too.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, in any case, glad this is getting off to a great start.
Oh my God.
I'm just glad it's the last day of Women's Day. I don't have to put up with this crap anymore. Back to normal tomorrow for you, Mary.
Oh my God. I'm a Bruins fan too. And that was heartbreaking the other night. Like, Jesus.
Oh God, it's okay. So how are you? What's going on?
I'm good. How are you? It feels like it's been forever.
Good. It's like a minute ago. I forgot about that game and the scarring. You just tear the Band-Aid right off of that, I guess. But okay, whatever. Hey, playing.
I watched the game too.
Okay, well, good for you. Because I shut that off pretty quickly. So, how you been? How are things going? We haven't recorded in a couple of weeks. We took the week off last week because it was shenanigans afoot that we did. We came off a really good episode with our friend Jim Hessler. We talked about Uncle Dan Sickles. We had a really, really good book club last night with the great Lisa Samia.
We did.
And we had a lot of fun with our live. And so now we're back to business, Mary. It's the end of March. The weather is warming up. Spring is in the air. And we're back. We're back recording after God, is a 2-week hiatus.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it's 2 weeks and 2 days, which is kind of a long time for us. But, here we are. We're back at it. And we're back to wrap up our discussion on female soldiers and spies. But before we do that, I'm going to be a good host and for once not be reminded by you that I'm, missing one part. What are you drinking tonight and out of what
goodness
mug?
Gracious. Wow.
Look at me. I'm on top.
You are.
Oh.
Ooh. Anyway, so I'm drinking Noon Juice, and it is from Progression. It is a good, solid IPA. And since it is still Women's Month here, I'm drinking from my Mary Surratt mug. It's the only mug I have that has a female on it, so I'm proud to do it. And what about you with the second most infamous Mary present in this podcast tonight?
Well, thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. I'm drinking Ghost Orchid IPA from the amazing Bellwoods Brewery out of Toronto. It's a new beer of theirs, which I was very happy to find it at the Lickbo the other day. It's very, very good.
So again with the Toronto, huh? Seriously?
Yeah, the Toronto.
Okay,
yeah.
All right, okay.
I hate the Leafs, and I have my entire life.
Okay.
Hate them.
All right, excellent. Okay, you were saying.
You're saying.
You were saying.
I am drinking it out of my Sarah Edmonds mug, which. Yeah, you can't see it on the camera because of the way Zoom is with backgrounds and stuff. But last time we recorded, I didn't have a mug with a female on it, but now I do, thanks to a friend of ours. She sent it to me, which was really, really awesome of her. So thank you to her for that. And
that is cool.
Yes, I'm very happy because Sarah Edmonds has definitely become I don't know. I hadn't really studied her too much prior to the last episode we did. And I don't know, she's definitely become somebody I really enjoy studying and reading about, and glad to kind of give her a bit of a voice in history.
We did. Last week, 2 weeks ago, we talked a lot about her. So today we are concluding our 2-part series on female soldiers in the Civil War. And after we spoke of the 2 Sarahs last time, of course, Sarah Slater and the aforementioned Sarah Edmonds. Though we're focusing on just a handful, really focusing on just the 4, for this whole thing, there are countless nameless women who fought on both sides in some sort of capacity. To quantify it would be basically impossible because many of their acts were basically covert. But I think most historians agree that there was probably about 500 to 700 or so women who participated in the Civil War outside of nursing. And, their reasons for joining, in some cases, were very personal. And some are due to just pure patriotism. And some, just like the boys, it offered some sort of adventure,
Exactly.
And regardless, their stories do need to be told. But maybe someday they'll just be referred to as soldiers and not female soldiers, right? And, to quote Sarah Edmonds, who you may have heard of, if you haven't heard of her, take a peek at your mug, also known as Frank Thompson, right?
Yes.
And of the 2nd Michigan, I could only thank God that I was free and could forward to work, and I was not obligated to stay home and weep. So Edmonds, as we know, through Mary's fantastic research, is the only woman to receive that Civil War veterans pension, right? If we remember correctly. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to discuss another pair of women who were not content to sit back and let all the boys do the work as well. Of course, we're going to talk about Pauline Cushman as well as Frances Elizabeth Quinn. So without further ado, why don't we kick it off with Pauline Cushman, Mary? So why don't you take over and wow us with your brilliance of Pauline Cushman?
Well, right. Well, the one thing I want to say is about these two women, there wasn't as much information about them as what I was able to find about Edmonds. I think it's because, I was able to read some of Edmonds' memoirs and all that, and Pauline Cushman did write memoirs as well. But anyway, I just want to say thank you to our friend MJ because she was able to answer some questions because she actually portrays Pauline Cushman in reenacting. And we're going to have her on here at some point to talk a little bit more in depth about Cushman and what it's like to portray her in living history.
Yeah, Pauline Cushman is such a fascinating character, and we'll talk about her in detail. We're not, I'm not going to do too much because we do want to save some. We're going to dedicate a whole episode to her with MJ, and MJ is the guru, as far as I'm concerned, with all things Pauline Cushman. So we'll talk about that. But needless to say, she's somebody with, like many of these people, deserve to have their story told, right? And for everyone we talk about, there is probably 100 that are out there that we don't. So that's what's great about history, is they're just waiting to be discovered, just like these people have.
Exactly. And I did find some parallels between Pauline and Sarah, which was pretty cool. So just to begin on Pauline, she's born June the 10th, 1833. She's born Harriet Wood. Pauline Cushman is actually her stage name, and I'll get to that soon. She's born in New Orleans, Louisiana, but she moves to Grand Rapids, Michigan when she was young because her father would open a trading post where he worked with trading with Native Americans. And I just thought this is like one connection she has with Sarah Edmonds is they both live in Michigan for a period of time. Her father was actually Spanish and her mother was French, and apparently the daughter of one of Napoleon Bonaparte's soldiers. She had 7 brothers. So at an early age, she learns how to ride horses. She learns how to shoot. And she also learns how to canoe in the rivers in the area where she lives around Grand Rapids. So again, very similar to Edmonds, like they've got this kind of, today we might call them a tomboy, just these kind of more, she's not like the traditional female of her time. She's into this kind of sense of adventure and hanging out with her brothers and all that. But her dream was to become an actress. So at the age of 17, almost the same age that Sarah Edmonds was when she left home, Harriet leaves home to go to New York, kind of that's where the acting is and all that. And this is where she takes the stage name of Pauline Cushman. But she struggles to find work, but eventually she's hired by a theater manager in New Orleans. So she goes back to the place where she was born. And she became known for kind of her full figure and her seductive charms as well, which she's going to use apparently when she's a spy for the Union Army. It's at this time when she starts acting that she meets her husband, Charles Dickinson, and he was a music teacher and a theater musician. And they actually end up moving to Cleveland, Ohio, because that's where his family is and they wanted to be close to his family. They have 2 children named Charles and Ida. When the Civil War breaks out, Charles, Pauline's husband, is going to enlist in the infantry as a musician. And he ends up, I think he gets wounded at the Battle of Shiloh, and he ends up passing away in 1862 on December the 8th. And Pauline said this of when it happened. When my husband came home from the army, he was in very poor health. In fact, a complete wreck. I had 2 small children and was unable to take care of both of them and him, as his father had a very large house with plenty of room, and he had 2 brothers and 3 sisters at home besides his father and mother. He went there to be taken care of. I heard his condition every day and frequently saw him. We never expected him to get any better, but regarded him beyond the hope of recovery. So it's pretty tragic. Like, she knows when he gets back, and so does the whole family, that he's never going to recover. So that is going to ultimately leave her a widow with 2 small children. Pauline does attend his funeral
He
which she
dies of,
may.
of dysentery,
It
right?
does, yes.
You know
Yeah,
what's
some
fascinating about this?
some say dysentery, some say he had a head injury that eventually killed him too.
Who knows? But it's interesting that you talk about Pauline Cushman. We talked about Sarah Slater last time. How
Mhm.
they both were married a musician slash dance teachers.
Yeah,
You got one who's going to be a Union spy, one's going to be a Confederate spy.
yeah.
It's just for the certain parallels you notice as you study these that it's just kind of a. Sometimes it's always fascinating to find these little details that probably no one cares about except me, admittedly.
No, I find it fascinating too. Like I was trying to find little connections that she might like, similarities between her and Sarah Edmonds, like that they're both in Michigan. They both seem to have this tomboyish nature about them where they're, like they enjoy riding horses and they seem to enjoy this sense of adventure, kind of outside of like the traditional roles that females held back then, which is pretty cool. So after Charles dies in December of 1862, Pauline, for whatever, probably a variety of reasons, she leaves her two children, Charles and Ida, with her sister-in-law, and she goes off to start acting again.
Mm.
And this left her kind of estranged from her in-laws, unfortunately. And of course, she's a mom, but she's leaving her kids too. But for whatever reason, right? Um, so she ends up acting in this play called The Seven Sisters in Knoxville. And this is where she begins her career as a Union spy. So one night, two Confederate officers approach her and say, "Hey, can you toast Jeff Davis in the play and we'll pay you like $350, which is a considerable sum."
It's good money.
In that time. Very, very good money. Now, this is where there's like with anything in history, it's not 100% known how this goes down. Like there's different reports as to what happened. There's some reports that she just did it and then was, pulled aside by a Union officer afterwards. There's another report that she went to this guy named Colonel Orlando Hurley Moore and said, "This is what these guys have asked me to do." And I guess she had a bit of a reputation for being a very good actress. So Moore says, "Well, why don't you do it? And we'll make you a Union spy."
Yeah, he's the U.S. Provost Marshal out of Louisville.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that she gets this order from these two Confederate officers to toast Jefferson Davis in the middle of this play, and she's like, "Oh, I don't know about that." And money's money though, got to pay the bills. But she gets
Well, yeah,
advice.
exactly. She's a widow, and women didn't make as much as men back then. Sorry, go ahead.
But it's funny. Moore is like, you know what? Screw it, do it. Who cares?
Yeah.
Have fun. She says, "Why don't you go ahead and do it, and then tomorrow come see me." Is what he says to her.
Yep.
So he might have had a premonition what was going to happen to her as soon as she did that.
Oh yeah, she ends up getting fired from the theater because they think she's a Confederate sympathizer. But Moore's thought is like, holy shit, if you can convince people that you like act so well that you can convince people that you're a Confederate, we need to have you behind enemy lines and gathering intelligence for us. And again, it seems so similar to Edmonds. I think Edmonds enjoyed the acting part of being frank, that she enjoyed that very much. A lot like Pauline Cushman, her passion seems to have been acting. So she ends up starting to spy for the Union. And there's one story where just as she's beginning, she's at this boarding house and she's being a very Confederate sympathizer, but she figures out that the person who owns the boarding house is going to poison the Union soldiers there.
Right.
Boarding house owner ends up getting arrested for that. And another time she dresses up as a man, convinces a woman who is carrying Confederate supplies that she's, secretly a Confederate officer. And the Union ends up getting those supplies. So
yeah, she's like the Meryl Streep of acting. You think about it. She could play the feminine role. She could play the masculine role. She could play the woman. She could play the man. And she does it in a way where she's so good at it that she's able to fool people on really all sides. So, I mean, as good as the Edmondses of the world are and the Bell Boyds of the world are, she has that background, that performance art ability. And she can think on her feet quickly, which is going to benefit her later on when she gets her butt caught. But it's fascinating to see how she's able to kind of play both sides of it and ultimately end up with the goal that she wants, which is pretty cool. Think about it.
No, it's a very, very fascinating story. So she ends up going to Nashville to be given very specific instructions from Colonel Truesdale, I think his name is. And
William Truesdale, yeah.
Yeah. And he works for Rosecrans. That's who his commanding officer is. And he will say to her, Miss Cushman, all that you have done is nothing compared with the service which it is now in your power to render your country. I have heard much of your courage, devotion, and ready expedients. But what I want you to do will demand a quickness of an intellect and a powerful constitution, a ready wit, and the courage of a soldier tried in 1,000 fields. So she's already got this reputation by the time she gets to Nashville. So what happens is she ends up going behind enemy lines, and she's, around where General Bragg's army is, his army of Tennessee.
She's told to pretend she's looking for her lost brother.
Yes, the lost brother story.
The lost brother. So it's just kind of interesting that's the role that she's playing.
Mm-hmm.
But she plays it well, though. And that you think about it, when we talked about Sarah Slater last week, she just like Slater, Cushman just seems to take it to it like a fish out in water, right?
She does.
She just does it.
Yeah.
Because you have to think, she just lost her husband. She got a small child,
mm-hmm.
and she is taking on a role that is obviously extremely dangerous for anybody.
Yeah.
Let alone somebody with very little experience in the field.
Mm-hmm.
And she does it, and she just does it, which is absolutely, it's just, I'm sure there was moments where she probably had feelings of trepidation and holy crap, what do I get myself into?
Yeah.
But she didn't show it, and it didn't affect her, which is fascinating.
No, it really is. And that reminds me of Edmonds in a way. Edmonds, as you said, just like Slater, just like Cushman, and I'm sure just like we're going to see with Quinn, they take to it. They adapt so quickly to the role. And, I think with Edmonds and especially and with Cushman too, it was this ability they had to act. They were playing a role and they enjoyed it. For Edmonds, it is this sense of adventure, and it probably was that way for Cushman too. But also, we know with Edmonds that it's very patriotic, and maybe it was that way with Cushman as well, but we're not 100% sure. So her mission is to report back on the Confederate defenses and, what Braxy's got going on, kind of thing. Right.
Right.
And so she is told by Truesdale, don't write anything down. Don't take anything physical, like don't take a map or anything like that. Commit it to memory. Because if you get caught, you don't need to have that shit on you. And that is unfortunately what happens to her. Is she does end up getting caught. She puts she's able to gather a lot of information because she had invites from the Confederate officers to walk along their lines, right? Because she's very attractive, very pretty woman. And, I don't want to say she uses that to her advantage at all, but, the men are, she's invited to walk along with them and all that. And as I said, she's supposed to commit it to memory, but she ends up making drawings of rebel fortifications at Shelbyville and Tullahoma. There's a story that she got a map off of one of the officers as well, which she concealed in her boot. And she's captured by none other than Morgan and Forrest when she's heading back across enemy lines. And she tries to escape, but is recaptured again. And they take her to Bragg, who orders her to be tried as a spy. And she ends up, the verdict is basically you're guilty, which that's death by hanging. So Bragg was going to have her executed.
Right.
But while she's waiting, she becomes very ill.
Ish.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Ill-ish. Because she's an actress.
The way you were sick from work a week ago Monday. Yeah.
Fucker, I was sick.
Oh yeah, you were sick all right.
Oh my God.
Anyway, you were saying.
Anyway, so she plays up her illness a little bit, and Braxton Bragg finds out he's got to get the fuck out where he is, because the Union is on his ass, right? Like Rosecrans is coming towards him. And so the one doctor's he's just she's not well enough to travel. She'll die on the way, blah, blah, blah. So they leave her there with in the home of a civilian doctor. And she ends up being rescued by the Union Army and going back to Nashville. But, she's become known as the spy of the Cumberland. And So her day, if you're well known, you can't be a spy anymore, right? So her days as
Mhm.
a spy are unfortunately over. Um, but she is awarded the rank of brevet major by the Union Army by James Garfield, and her rank is confirmed by President Lincoln. He's the guy with the hat.
Yeah, and the Union ladies of Nashville present her with the full military uniform, and she's
Yep.
going to wear it. She travels throughout the Union, and when gets left behind there in Shelbyville, she's I can't go.
Yep.
And Bragg's just okay, fine, and then she has a miraculous recovery as soon as the Union comes, and it's amazing that she was able to pull it. If you want to talk about a good acting job, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so we'll talk about how and she gets that Miss Major Pauline Cushman title
Yeah.
around this time. And so she's wearing that uniform and
Yeah.
she's doing all this cool stuff.
Yeah. She's a very confident looking woman in that picture. I love that picture of her. She's wearing that uniform. It's like, wow, that's, you know, she just, I love that photo of her. Um, but she ends up in November of 1864. Her 6-year-old son, Charles, will pass away, and he's buried in Ohio in the same cemetery as his father. And her daughter Ida she will die a few years later, and her grave is unfortunately unmarked, which is really sad. I think she's buried in the same cemetery, but she doesn't have a marker on her grave,
No.
which is really, really sad. So, Pauline now has lost her 2 children. So she's widowed and she's lost her 2 children. She's no longer a spy for the Union, but because she had a reputation, she's well known. So she actually lectures for several years after she, is no longer a spy. 1864, she publishes her memoir, The Romance of the Great Rebellion. And there's also another bio written about her by Ferdinand Sarmiento. I'm going to butcher his name. She also ends up, she becomes so well known. She lectures where P.T. Barnum is as well.
Yeah, she's like a one-man show, one-woman show. She
Yeah.
was up there. She has a show called The Spy of the Cumberland. She's up there telling about her exploits, and the crowd is absolutely spellbound of all these things that Pauline Cushman has done. That P.T. Barnum actually is going to sponsor it.
Yeah.
So in that, like we said before, the problem of becoming really famous is you can't be a spy anymore.
Mm-mm.
And so she hit the big time. And we're talking still
Yep.
1864 now. We're talking
Yep.
still, about a third of the way, left in the war. But she certainly is becoming an extremely famous person because of her exploits. And now she's got her uniform, she's got the major title, and now she's
Yep.
she's doing the Chris Rock show. I don't know if she got slapped or not, but she's up there by herself telling her stories of tales of excitement. So for her, things are certainly moving right along because she started as an actress and she was struggling to make a couple $100 by these Confederate guys. Now she's probably one of the more famous actors in the country by 1864.
Exactly. Yeah. So she's living her dream, which is awesome. Like her dream at 17 when she leaves home is to be an actress. And now she's lecturing and she's telling the stories of her adventures she had while she was a spy. And she's got this name, the Spy of the Cumberland, which is pretty cool. From 1865 to 1867, she traveled with the Irish comedian James M. Ward, but she eventually goes on her own again. I think she's very independent, and that's one thing I love about her. She comes across as being very, very independent and I don't think she liked to be tied down anywhere at all. By 1872, though, she's unfortunately become not as popular, and she marries Augustus Fitchner. I can't say his last name. And is unfortunately she's widowed within a year. So she ends up spending 5 years working at a redwood logging camp near Santa Cruz, California. So she's out in California now. January 29th, 1879, she marries Jeremiah Fryer in Arizona. They have an adopted daughter named Emma, and they run a hotel and a stagecoach. And Fryer was actually sheriff for a number of years. In 1890, though, Emma, their adopted daughter, she dies of supposedly of a seizure. And the grief over that it led them to unfortunately separate. Yeah. So, here we have Cushman again. By 1890, she's not doing very well. She's poor, and she's also suffering from arthritis and a few other health problems.
Yeah, she finds herself in El Paso, Texas, penniless by 1892. So she's done that full 360 of what it was.
Yeah.
And you can see, all things going back to how her life has been, where she had that little spurt of excitement there, but her life was a tragic one at the
Yes, it
beginning
was.
and the end. And unfortunately for her, it's not going to end. It's not going to be a happy ending for Cushman as
No.
she gets a little bit older.
Yeah. And so she ends up applying for her first husband's pension on February, and it's awarded to her on February the 4th, 1893. But it's only amounts to about $8 a month retroactive to December 8th, 1862, which is less than $1,000 that she's going to receive for that. And when she's living in El Paso to make money, she does sewing in exchange for food and a place to sleep, which is on a cot in the kitchen.
Mhm.
So, again, it's very tragic. And she becomes around this time addicted to opioids, and she mixes them with whiskey, which, as we know, is not a very good combination. And
Mhm.
by 1893, like, the arthritis is really bad, and she sadly dies of an overdose December the 2nd, 1893, and she's only 60 years old at this time. So really tragic ending for her.
Yeah, she's got
You
that
know?
rheumatism and the arthritis, and
Yep.
she's with this grief. When she turns up dead by the morphine overdose, self morphine, and her landlady is going to find her,
Yeah.
and that's going to be it for her. And there's all kinds of intrigue and speculation about how that whole thing went down.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll
But
never know if it was, like, if it was accidental or if it was deliberate. There's a lot of speculation around that. Like, who knows, right? Like, I mean, if you're mixing, it's, you know, with whiskey, it can have not very good results, right? Um, but it's not totally, horrible for it. Like, she does have a big funeral that's put on by the California Division of the Grand Army of the Republic and the Women's Relief Corps. And she's actually buried in the officer section of Presidio Cemetery in San Francisco. And her grave just simply reads Pauline C. Fryer, Union Spy. So that's, she's not even buried as Pauline Cushman. She's buried with her married name, Fryer.
yeah, and so she has a kind of an ignominious end, and it's unfortunately it's she doesn't get the accolades that I think a lot of people would expect her to do, especially by looking at her gravestone. It's
Yeah.
very simple. Doesn't even have the full the Cushman name like you just said on it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the thing about her is she's just another one of those cases of those people who who saw an opportunity, felt that she had to do it, and she did it without any sort of fear, any sort of
Yep.
trepidation, any sort of anxiety that we can see of anyway. I mean, again, reading the stuff, it's easy to associate that she's just going to whip right through it, but you have to imagine there was some fear along the way.
Yep.
She's put in charge of really helping set up that Tullahoma campaign. You think about the big
Yeah.
campaign that leads to Chattanooga,
I know.
and
She's
and
part of,
Rosecrans.
she's part of that.
Yeah, Rosecrans is going to entrust her to
Yep.
find out the situation going forward that leads to all those battles culminating in Chattanooga,
Yep.
which is going to eventually end up, pushing through Georgia, Atlanta, the whole deal.
Mm-hmm.
So she's an instrumental person to help set that up. And she's going to get herself caught because she gets caught with the information
Mm-hmm.
in her boot there. But the way she's able to stall Bragg, right?
Yep.
And being ill and whatever. So I'm sure she was sick to a point, but I think
Yep.
she understood
If
that
she played it up, she would be rescued.
well, she knew that the cavalry literally was coming at some
Yep.
point, and
Yep.
so she was able to hold on, and she was able to, fortunately for her, for at least for a short period of time, benefit from that with that stage thing with Barnum.
Yep.
But again, things kind of settle back to the way they were, and she kind of goes down that spiral that you see a lot of people do. And it's really too bad. You wonder if the trauma of the war, of losing children, losing spouses, if that's going to affect a lot of things going forward. And then throwing the rheumatism, throwing the arthritis,
Yep.
and then the morphine to fix everything. And whether she's addicted to it or whether she just overdosed or who knows what. But it's a sad ending for her.
Yeah, it
And
is.
and a lot of these things, you study these people and you kind of expect things are going to work out well, right?
Yeah.
But for her, unfortunately, it doesn't. And she dies a very sad and lonely death, which is not fair for someone like her.
No, I think she definitely deserved more. But the tragedy of losing 3 children, of losing 2 husbands, one to war wounds, and the other, she's not even married to him for a year before he dies, and the other one, they end up separating over the grief of their adopted daughter Emma. It's very, very tragic. And I'm really glad we were able to tell her story tonight. She was an interesting person, very interesting person to research.
And we're gonna do a full
yeah we're gonna do more in depth with MJ, because MJ is definitely she is, as you said, the guru for Pauline Cushman. She even portrays her, which is really cool, I think.
Yeah, I don't portray anybody. I'm just pretend me.
Yeah.
Just an empty beer can named Aaron.
Oh my God, you are not.
Yeah, you can do the intro tonight. Well, I think that's a good story. I'm gonna talk about another soldier, Mary, who joined for a reason very similar to how Rufus Dawes did, that we talked about earlier, out of pure patriotism. And this is a woman by the name of Frances Elizabeth Quinn. So we're going to talk a lot about her. Her story is an amazing one if you really think about it. Just to summarize, she's going to enlist 5 times, each time after being dismissed the previous time because her gender was discovered. A woman who was injured in battle, she's captured, taken prisoner by the Confederates, all while doing this job that she had to help the Union cause. So she's somebody who just couldn't get rid of. She's kept coming back and back and back. And her story is one similarly that you wonder how she could do it, how anybody could do it, right? So Frances Elizabeth Quinn, she's born somewhere around 1844, 45. No one really knows when she's actually born. Her family is going to be coming from Ireland, and they're going to settle in a place called Lamoille, Illinois, a town in the northwest portion of that state. Frances will be around 2 or 3 years old when the family is going to welcome a baby boy named Thomas, who is going to be about, like I said, 2 years younger than Frances, right? And as the kids get a little older, so they're still kids, the parents are both going to die. And so it's going to leave Frances and Thomas as orphans, unfortunately. Now, because the kids were young, it was decided that each child was going to be put into a foster home.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately for the kids, they couldn't find a family to take both, so they had to split them up.
No.
So the younger, Thomas, is going to be shipped off to live with a family called the Coakleys, while Frances is going to live with the Reno family. Now, this Reno family is the same Renos who claimed Jesse Reno, exactly, who would be killed at South Mountain in September of 1862. And she's going to be Frances's surrogate uncle. That's kind of how it's going to be, right? Now, fun fact, by the way, Mary, Jesse Reno's son, you know what he did in 1891? He invented the escalator, which my legs thank him for, by the way.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
So there we go. So Jesse Reno, who's also, another Jesse.
Look at you, full of random facts.
Every time you see the escalator, there you go, Jesse.
Salute
Reno.
it.
I salute it. Thank you, Jesse.
The Renovator.
but exactly. But so when Frances turns 12 years old, you know what she does? Just like you did, she joins a convent, Mary. That's what she does.
Yeah.
And she's gonna go to Wheeling, Virginia, which is now Wheeling, West Virginia, to get an education. Now, when she is finished at age 16 years old, the Civil War is just starting. Okay. Yep. And she's going to return to Lamoille from Wheeling. And when she gets home, she's going to be stunned to find out that her younger brother, Thomas, who's 14 at the time, he's going to lie and he's going to join the Union Army. He's going to join the 52nd Illinois. He's going to join at age 14. And Frances and Thomas were very, very close to how orphan children tend to be, right? They tend to find that connection, right? And Thomas joining the military affected Frances deeply, very, very deeply, almost like twins, right? Wow. For that reason, Frances Quinn is going to decide that if Thomas enlisted, guess what? I'm going to too. But of course, there's a problem, Mary. You know what the problem is?
Might be because she's a girl.
Problem is that she's a girl, okay?
Yeah.
So regardless, Frances wants to try, so she's going to cross that state line into Indiana. She's going to dress up as a male, and she's going to be named Frank Miller, or BF Miller if you're nasty, okay? Now, have you noticed that most of these women take the name Frank? Have you noticed?
I know. I was just going to say Edmonds took the name, like she's Franklin Thompson. I don't know. Maybe it was a common name. I don't know. I was going to say the other similarity between Quinn and Edmonds is that they are both immigrants.
They certainly are. They are. Although there's some questions whether or not Frances was born in Illinois or she was born in France. That's the thing. Her birth is kind of nebulous. Yeah. But one thing is not in doubt. She was medium height with dark hazel eyes and dark brown hair. She was a rounded features, Okay.
Mhm.
And she had
Really?
a feminine voice. So that's how most people described her. Now, her enlistment ruse worked, and she's now finds herself a new member of the 15th Indiana. Okay. This regiment has 30-day papers. That's it. So she's joined for 30 days, and that's going to be it. So her stay with the old Hoosiers, Mary, is going to be a short one. It's going to be like your last DQ job, in and out, gone. See you later. But no, but Frank, what's interesting is at some point when she joined the military, Frances didn't allegedly, she definitely did. She wrote a letter to her brother Thomas to state that she was enlisted.
Mhm.
Okay. Now that letter doesn't exist, but the reason it doesn't exist anymore. But the reason why what happened is Thomas's response to her still does exist, and
Oh, wow.
he was pissed when he
Mhm.
found out that Frances joined the military. Okay, and she's going to respond back to Thomas. She's going to write a letter. It's going to have a copy here, not the original. So don't get all excited. It's just a copy. Okay.
Good.
It says, "My dear brother, I wish to say that in reply to your recent letter that I volunteered in the army because I wish to have a part in the defense of my country's flag. I think I love my country as well as you do, and I think I may learn to shoot just as straight as you can. And if my health continues, I may be of equal service to that of yourself." This is a classic. If you could do, I can do better. Letter to your little
That's
brother. Is
amazing.
what this was.
That's
Okay.
so awesome. Yeah, she's so like, just like Edmonds, she's so patriotic, wanting to, fight for her country. She just doesn't want to kind of stand back. She's like, well, hey, if you can do it, so can I.
So you can tell by the tone of the letter she writes to Thomas that the letter he must have sent to her
Yep.
originally, because you could tell she's how
He
siblings are.
bitched her out
Things,
totally for that.
he
He's
did.
like, what the fuck are you doing? You're a
What?
girl. You
Nonsense,
can't do that. Girls can't do that.
But her enlistment in that 15th Indiana is going to run out, that 30-day paper, and she's going to sign up again, this time with the 2nd Tennessee
Mhm.
Union Regiment, okay? And they're stationed in Louisville, Kentucky. Now, her stay with the 2nd Tennessee is going to be a short one because she's going to be discovered pretty quickly. She's a girl. I'm not sure what happened, okay? But they kind of smelled this one out pretty quickly. They kind of said, that's the way it
Yep.
was. Now, it's interesting when you study someone like Quinn, is a lot of regiments claim her in
Yeah.
history. So you try to maneuver the way up the stream of where she actually went is not
Mhm.
the easiest job in the world.
Mhm.
But a month later, in August of 1862, she's going to join up with Company G of the 90th Illinois. This is the Irish regiment that's from
Yep.
Chicago, right? Now, this is going to be discovered. So she doesn't keep a secret too well. But there was one guy who did keep a secret, and his name was a Canadian of all things, Mary, a soldier
This is the Canadian connection you told me
right,
about.
named Jerry Kane, or he's also called Jer O'Kane, because it was a Canadian, it was the Irish regiment. And Frances met him in Chicago. She met him probably right around the time she signed up with
Oh, you there?
what
Oh, you
yeah.
froze for a second.
Okay. All right. Well, I was going to say there are no official records of this, but it seems anyway that she was claiming to be married to this guy Jerry at this point. Okay, and although when they were discovered by a guy named Colonel Timothy O'Meara, okay, who was the colonel of the regiment, she introduced herself as Eliza Miller and said that she was recently married to Jerry Kane and wants to stay with them in camp. So they find out she's a girl and she's going to get kicked out, but she says, no, you can't kick me out. I'm married to Jerry over here.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to stick around. Now, this marriage, there's no real record of it. It's probably a common law thing, or who the hell knows. But according to a guy named Private Cabrick from Company G of Francis, she married an excellent young man, a member of her mess, and remained with the regiment ever since. Private James M. Jones says she was serving with her lover. That's what he said.
Ooh.
Okay, so it's interesting. One fun fact for this, Mary, this one for you, Fincheroo, okay, is eventually Jerry is going to they're going to get separated. They're going to split the two up. Jerry's going to get sent to fight in Atlanta. He's going to be killed on July 20th, 1864 at the Battle of Ezra Church, fighting for guess who?
Oh my God, Howard.
Oliver Otis Howard.
Oh, there's our OO reference.
So there's your Howard reference. So poor Jerry. He must not have been able to run too fast because he got killed at Ezra Church. Okay, but by the end of 1862, Frances is back in the hunt looking for a fighting regiment again, right? And this is the fourth time now she's going to be able to hook up with the 2nd East Tennessee Cavalry, this time as
Mhm.
a teamster. And she's going to enlist under the name Ellie Reno now. So she's moving right along. She's going to be sent to Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And on December 31st, 1862, she's going to participate in the Battle of Stones River, where she'll be wounded in the shoulder. Now, this is going to lead to her discharge because of her injury. It's going to take about 6 months to rehab the
Mhm.
shoulder injury she has. While she's rehabbing in Louisville, guess what she's going to do? She's going to get married again. Okay.
Wow.
This time she gets married to, and I quote, a good-looking and gallant Captain Stewart. That's who she marries. Okay. Which probably, proved her marriage to Jerry Kane probably was not official.
Was
It sounds like
bullshit.
she really did. Okay. But sadly for Quinn, Stewart's going to be killed right almost immediately after the wedding. He ain't going to make it. So she's going to lose her husband at this point, right? Now, while they're in the hospital, she's going to get a second piece of news that's going to devastate her.
Yes.
She's going to find out that the previous year, news is slow going through Tennessee
Mhm. Yeah.
apparently, that her brother Thomas was killed at the Battle of Shiloh the previous year. And that's going
God.
to really, really mess her up because again, they were of equal minds, it seems. They were very close.
Yes.
And it took a while for the news to get to her because she's hiding in disguise. Of
Yeah, it's
course, nobody's
April
gonna find her.
1863. Like it's a year after the battle.
And so it takes a little bit of time. So with the losses of Stuart, her husband, and especially Thomas, the heartbroken Quinn now is going to enlist in the army again in Louisville under her old Frank Martin name. And this time she will join the 25th Michigan with General Jeremiah Boyle's district of Western Kentucky. Boyle is the guy who's chasing John Hunt Morgan around.
Yep.
And that's who this is the same guy, right? Now, unfortunately for Quinn, she's going to be discovered again as a female and she's going to be discharged. Now, at this time, she's sick of being discharged. She's just sick of it. So when this last time she gets pissed, she decides to plead her case to the big man, Abraham
I
Lincoln.
was going to say, yeah, she writes that letter to Lincoln.
And she's going to write a letter to the guy with the big hat. And she's going to write, and this is the letter she wrote to Lincoln. I do not wish you to think me bold as I write to you wholly out of love for my native country. I am true blue and for the noble flag. I am willing to die and have been in the army for nearly 1 year, and I wish to see it over, and I am willing to do anything to aid the government that lies in my power for my country. I have lived for my country, and I will die. And she signs it, Ellie Reno and Frances Quinn. Wow. It's the first time she uses Frances Quinn on anything. It's this letter to Lincoln. Now, it appears the letter must have done something because she's told to report soon later to our old buddy Ambrose Burnside, of all people, to work. She's in Louisville, and she's going to work with Burnside in that field hospital in Louisville, right? Now, although she's doing exactly what she wanted to do, she's helping her country. She wants to fight. I mean, she's like you on a Friday night. She wants to fight someone. Go. And so in October of 1863, she's going to rejoin that 90th Illinois again. She's going to sign up again. She finds herself in the state of Alabama, of all places, Mary, and she's going to get herself captured this time.
Yep.
So the Rebs are going to get her, and they're going to march her to a prison camp in Atlanta. So she's going to be hauled off to Atlanta, Georgia. Now, she tries to escape, and she's going to get shot in the leg. Now, it's either in the calf or the thigh. Who the hell knows? But it's
not in the thas.
It wasn't the thas. We just missed the thas. It was a little lower, okay? With the thigh and the ass meat. It's a little lower, okay? But during that was the greatest thing. But during her, so she's going to be recaptured because she's going to get shot in the leg. Now, during her rehab in that prison hospital, it's not long until her captives are going to discover her little secret, right? And in that she was a woman, and she's quickly going to get sent to a civilian hospital to recover. Yeah. I can only imagine the look on these guys' faces. She was peeing sitting down all the time was probably gave her away, right?
God.
But whatever it was, they found out what she was. Now, while she's in that civilian hospital, that leg injury she gets is going to get really bad, right? According to a medical report, it says she was wounded in the thigh. No bones were broken, but it was a deep, ugly flesh wound. Gangrene set in, and most of her calf was destroyed. That's what it said. So that's why you can't tell what the hell her injury was. But but she is going to recover eventually. But what's funny is the story of this captured Union soldier who turns out to be a woman goes all the way to the top in the Confederate government. And Jefferson Davis finds out about it. And he is absolutely intrigued about this. I mean, he can't believe it, right? Now, he finds out there's a story of this woman who dresses up as a man who fights for the Union, and she's caught, and she's just a fighter. So you know what he does? He personally writes a letter to her. And you know what he does? He offers her a lieutenant's commission in the Confederate Army.
What?
He says, you know something? You can fight. How about you join us? What the hell? Right? And so he writes a personal letter to her offering her a lieutenant's commission to fight for the Confederacy for Quinn. What do you think she does with that? She pulls out her as if card.
Yeah,
right? And
not her F this.
And she exactly, and she's going to turn that down because she wasn't going to fight against me. She's very patriotic. Because at the beginning of this, you know, her comparable on the boys' side is Rufus Dawes. That's who she was, and she was never going to fight against her own country.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks later, this is on February 17th, 1864. Quinn, along with 26 other prisoners, are all going to get exchanged. They're going to let them go. Now, when she's leaving the prison, I mean, she's a rock star. And they all know she's a woman. All the Rebs are yelling to her on the way out, go home, just go home to her. And she turns and she says, my only brother was killed at Pittsburgh Landing, and I have no home and no friends. And they were probably like, shit. They were probably like, damn. So that's what she said to these Confederates when they were mocking her. So she was going home, but she was sad about it. Now, upon her arrival back on Union lines, Quinn is reported to have said, hurrah for God's country, as she crossed back into Union lines. And she's going to end up going to Nashville, into Tennessee, where she's going to they're going to put her back in the hospital again to recover for her leg.
Yeah.
And she is going to recover completely, and she'll be discharged from the hospital, and she's going to travel to Pennsylvania, where she's going to remain for the remainder of the war. So the war is over for Frances Quinn. Now, from Pennsylvania, she's going to bounce around. She's going to eventually find her way to Ohio, of all places, and she's going to settle in the village of Harmar, which is a lovely hamlet within the city of Marietta. That's right on the Ohio River, and that's southeast portion of the state.
That's right, near where Rufus Dawes was from.
Yep, exactly.
Yep, that's where he was. Marietta.
All goes back to good segue. All goes back to Rufus Dawes. You sank my battleship there, Mary. Well done. Well done.
I do pay attention.
Okay, you did. Okay, but anyway. So she's going to get there, and while she's there, she's going to meet a guy named Matthew Angel. Now, Angel was a veteran of the 91st Ohio Heavy Artillery under a guy named Captain Edward Aylshire, as well as the 2nd Ohio Heavy Artillery. And soon later, okay, they got hot and heavy, and they got married in Gilead, Ohio, on August 12, 1866. The war is over now. She's going to settle into civilian life with her new husband, and they're going to have 3 kids, ironically, all girls. It's funny how life is, right, for her. So Rosa, Louisa, and Maggie are going to be the kids' names. And Maggie will be the youngest. 2 months after Maggie was born, Frances is going to start to develop a medical condition at the time called dropsy. Okay.
Yeah.
Dropsy is edema is what it is. It's a disease when that you have fluid buildup in your tissues, right?
Yeah.
And it tends to focus more on your legs. So I don't know if it has to do with her injury or what the deal was.
Probably would have been to do with her injury, right?
I mean, who knows? I mean, how it is back then. But regardless, she's going to get this thing, and her condition is going to get worse. And she is going to die on June 8th, 1872. 26 years old.
I know, she's so young.
26 or 27, depending on because I don't know what her birthday was. But you think of someone who lived a full life, right?
Oh, did she ever? Yeah.
I mean, she got married 3 times, allegedly, 3 kids.
Yep, she has 3 kids. Yeah.
5 times. Fights, gets shot, escapes, captured, gets paroled. I mean, she does it all. I mean, she works the blizzard machine and the drive-through with the DQ Mary.
Hey, that takes talent. That takes talent.
It does. But you know what's interesting is she is going to be buried near her home in Gallia, Ohio, in a private cemetery that's since been lost to time. It's long gone, right? Now, what's interesting is her story kind of vanished for a while, 1866 until 1916. When a newspaper called the Gallipolis Bulletin from the town of Gallipolis, Ohio, is going to write a story about her, which is going to rekindle the story of Frances Elizabeth Quinn. And it starts, the first paragraph, this is how the story starts. In a little private cemetery near the village of Thivner, a few miles from Gallipolis, Ohio, there sleeps one whose name, instead of being chiseled on an impervious marble slab bearing the simple dates of her birth and demise, should be written boldly and indelibly with those of the patriots and heroes of history. That's how it starts, and it tells her whole story. And it's not it's a private cemetery on private land. It gets sold. It's just gone now. So it's I don't think it's even exists anymore where she's buried. But it's interesting when you study someone like Quinn, in a war where men deserted, where men now literally paid not to get out of being drafted.
Yeah.
This is a woman who, it was pretty obvious based on the repeated attempts to enlist that Frances Elizabeth Quinn's gravestone should be written in such a way, if you really think about it, as she's one of the many of those literally nameless and faceless women to history now.
She is,
right?
Yeah.
And instead, her grave is lost to history. And like so many people whose names, will never be studied as they should be, she's somebody who has left a really indelible mark that should be written in marble, historically speaking, because she is the epitome of someone who fought for the right reasons. Right. She fought for patriotism. When she found that her brother died, she didn't just walk away. She fought harder. She kept going.
Yeah.
She got to the point where she was literally offered a position in the Confederate Army no way. And she didn't do it. And she got exchanged, went home, and she tried to live her life the best way. I mean, very much like Rufus Dawes tried to do, like Charles Tilden tried to do, like many of these guys who, when the war ended, the history drops. Right. But she's out there somewhere in that gully, Ohio, and she's somebody who, despite her importance in history, is someone who is only studied by a very niche group of people who study this. And she's one of 500 to 700 women who fought in the Civil War, whose stories just aren't told.
No. And it's like, like when we had Lisa on our book club, her Nameless and Faceless Women in the Civil War, the poetry, which we both would highly recommend our listeners check out. It's beautiful poetry. It's a great way to look at the Civil War. It's very humanizing, and it gives a voice to these women that don't have them. And, I think Quinn is all the, the 4 that we studied, and the countless others. There's Belle Boyd. There's others that, they need a voice in history, and their stories deserve to be told as much as Rufus Dawes, as much as Howard, as much as Sherman, as much as, any of these guys.
Who's Howard?
Oh God, Jesus.
Any chance you get, huh? Any chance you get.
Anyways, but I'm really happy we were able to tell the stories of these 4 women. I wish it could have been more, and I'm sure we will look at them again. And it just doesn't have to be when it's Women's History Month, right? But you have to think about it. For the 500 to 700 that apparently fought, like, there's got to be so many more we don't know about that were just that they were just that good. And you look at somebody like Quinn, who she gets caught all those times, and then you have someone like Edmonds who manages to go all the way through her service, gets malaria, and she's like, I got to get the fuck out of here. And that's when she goes to Philadelphia and checks in that hospital as a woman, and then sees the poster that she had, Frank Thompson had deserted, and it was death. And then she goes back to her friends in Michigan, and that's how she gets her pension. And the men rally around her. Like she conceal herself.
That's the thing that Quinn didn't really get.
Well, I wonder if it's, it just depends, right? Like how well you can play the role of a man. I'm not saying that Quinn didn't, but it sounds like she might have been a little bit more feminine than what Edmonds was.
Say what gave her away was her voice a lot. I guess she had a very high voice, very feminine type of voice. Kind of tough to pull that one off when you walk in there. And but again, it was not as bad as the South. To be a Southern soldier, all you needed to do was have 2 top teeth, 2 bottom teeth to tear at the cartridges. That was it, really. But there was, in a time when they were fighting desperately for Union soldiers, she pens that letter to Lincoln, right?
Yeah. Oh, she's bold.
Lincoln appears to acquiesce a little bit because she ends up going with Burnside and sticking around, but she wants to fight. and she never loses her leg, although it was pretty close.
Yeah.
But she ends up with the dropsy at the end, and she dies. I was amazed when if you read her whole story and you said she died. For me, I was stunned. She was only 26
I know. Yeah, I was
because she
too.
led.
When I read that, when I
Yeah.
was researching her too, like I was like, oh my God, she's got to be the youngest one of the four women we looked at.
I mean, she lived like three different lives,
Hmm.
and it's fun for me personally doing the comparison because I did Sarah Slater last
Yeah.
time, who was a much more nefarious, slippery type of person who no one really knows. And this woman, apparently, she was easy to pick out. Eventually, even her brother's death found her way to her. So someone, I mean, she couldn't have been
Yeah.
hiding out that well. But again, she was relentless and she wouldn't give up. She was persistent. She had determination, Mary. That's what she had. She was
Ooh,
determined.
ooh,
Ooh,
she
she
was.
has.
Oh,
But that's
we all know where
but I
determination gets you.
it usually does. It usually does. But I think it's a fascinating story, and
Yeah.
Cushman is another one. And we'll talk more in detail of her a little bit down the road because I think
Yeah.
someone like Pauline Cushman deserves a full episode on her own.
Yeah.
And it was good that you kind of did the high level overview to talk about her.
Hmm.
You will get more of the details later, but I like the nameless ones that admittedly they do. Now
Oh, I did
Frances
too.
Quinn is not exactly nameless, but again, she's not that level of a Belle Boyd or a Greenough or any of the
No,
top
no, and
shelf
she doesn't.
spy
We don't.
women.
We don't have her writing like we do Edmonds or Cushman, right? Like we don't have that. But and again, I love drawing the parallels between the two. Like we have, Quentin possibly could have been an immigrant, which Edmonds was. Edmonds and Quinn are very much like Rufus Dawes in their level of patriotism. And
Right.
these are two women that, Edmonds, we know for sure was not born in the United States. Yet here she is, and she's like, yeah, I'm going to fight for my country. And Quinn might not have been either. She might have been born in Ireland. We're not 100% sure of that.
Well, that's the problem. That's the thing is her birth date's unknown, 44,
That's just
45.
like Sheridan.
But that would depend on whether she was born in Ireland or Illinois. That's
Yeah.
what the thing. So that's what we'll never know for sure because there are sources that say both,
Yep.
admittedly.
Just
So
like
if someone says,
Sheridan.
yeah, and so that's exactly what that was. But again, the Marietta connections was always interesting because when
Hmm.
I as I was studying her, all I could think about was Rufus Dawes
Well,
because
that,
it's
yeah.
this very similar mindset. Now Dawes, he had the issues because he fought and he went on. He kind of was taking water as the war went
Yeah.
on. But that will to fight, that beginning, that go 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 attitude, reminded me a lot of them. So it was interesting. They both kind of ended up sort of in the same area or
They
from the
did.
same area, but it's a little bit, but it's interesting how that goes. But that's it's interesting how that whole thing is. But we'll have fun with that. We'll have a good time
Yeah.
with that.
Well, I definitely saw like I said, the comparison between Dawes and Quinn and Edmonds. The difference being Edmonds was just she did not, she clearly saw war as the adventure, right? Like her memoirs were very much like this is what I did, and it was one big adventure, right? Um, but it's interesting to draw comparisons between all of them.
It is, but it's a fun study. It's fun to
Hmm.
look at these people. I would suggest anybody, if you want to just go down a rabbit hole, just find one of these people and just dig and dig and dig because there's just enough info to keep you looking, but there's not a lot. So it's really a really good field trip. And when you study any of these people, it's one that you can really get into. And the more you study, the more you want to learn. And that was the
Exactly.
case certainly for all four of these people.
Oh
So
yeah, they're all so fascinating, and I'm so glad we were able to give them kind of like a voice in history, and just the fact we know somebody too, MJ, who portrays Cushman, which is fascinating, and it's actually got me thinking, wow, do I maybe portray Edmonds? Um, it's even got me thinking of that because I was just so fascinated and got wrapped up in her story when we researched her. So I'm really glad we did this. And we shouldn't have
no,
waited till Women's History Month to do it, but I'm glad we did it in Women's History Month. you know.
no, it's very cool. It's very cool. So the calendar turns to April. So what's next for us?
So next we are going to be doing a couple episodes about Appomattox. We were going to do Shiloh, but then we thought, wow, wait, we did Bentonville last year. Let's look into the Eastern Theater and cover Appomattox. So we're going to be doing a couple episodes about that. we might be doing a kind of fun, lighter episode coming up, which the topic to that will be revealed once we decide what it is.
You'll let me know, right?
Of course I will.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
God. And we will be having our roundtable sometime in April as well, which we will let you know the date of that soon. Hopefully it's going to be on the third Wednesday. We've had to kind of mix it up the last few times, but yeah, we've got lots of good stuff coming down the pike for y'all. And yeah, with the next episode being episode 80, we are 20 episodes away from episode 100. So that's pretty cool.
Your math skills continue to impress.
I know that Mary McCullen math that was revealed in the first few episodes when you asked me what percentage of casualties that is, and I must have made you so proud when I came back.
Oh God, you tell you right, another job done. All right. Well, I think it's a good place to drop off here. So a lot of fun stuff coming down the pike. Looking forward to talking about Appomattox, 2 episodes, and another 2-part we'll be doing starting next week. So live coming up this weekend again. Yep. Like you said, a lot of fun stuff coming down the pike. So any final words from you, Fincheru?
Well, thank you to all our listeners for supporting us through these 79 episodes. You know, you guys are awesome, and we obviously would not be doing this podcast without you. The Facebook lives are so fun on Saturday or Sunday mornings whenever we do them, to see the kind of everybody hanging out together and all that. And then we wouldn't be here without you. And I certainly could not do this podcast without you, Darren. You are the best co-host I could have ever imagined.
Well, I'm just happy to remember the team. Mary, you know how that is. You know how it is. And it's always,
you bring it every week, and you know more about the Civil War than anybody else.
Oh,
I know.
But, yeah, anyway, it's great. It's great to do this.
Any final words from you?
Nope. It's a good episode. I really enjoyed these last couple ones we did on these female ones. It was good that we gave them a voice, told their story. Yep. People probably heard of them, but you know what though? For now, they're front of mind. At least these episodes are front of mind. They're not just background people that people study. So off we go. So we're going to head off to the great blue yonder, as they say, head off in the weekend. So everyone have a safe weekend. Thanks for supporting us as always. We look forward to seeing you on our live and the many shenanigans coming down the road for us. All right. So have a great weekend, everybody. Peace the hell out.
See y'all later.